Hey there. Last episode, we looked at some potential negatives that come along with how closing the gap has been reported over the years, particularly deficit discourse. To be honest, it was a bit of a bummer, and so today we're going to be looking on the bright side. As we discussed last episode, the Lowinger Institute and the National Centre for Indigenous Studies described the Closing the Gap reports as being dominated by deficit metrics, and that these can create a restrictive narrative of failure that homogenises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They also acknowledged, though, that since 2008, government policy has been strongly influenced by the Closing the Gap agenda, and that such statistics reported annually can be used to call on governments when they are seen to be failing in their responsibilities to their citizens. The Lowinger Institute also created a second report that looks into strength-based approaches. This report builds on the first one by reviewing and analysing a growing body of work of proposals and attempts to displace deficit discourse in health. The analysis found that strength-based approaches in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health were the most commonly used, accepted, and successful concepts to counter both explicit and implicit deficit. They seek to move away from the traditional problem-based paradigm and offer a different language and set of solutions to overcoming an issue. While the term strength-based approaches is commonly used, it has multiple and sometimes paradoxical meanings. Strength-based approaches are not a uniform set of policy and program protocols, nor will they always be an antidote to deficit. They are rather a conceptual framework for approaching development and intervention. These approaches and themes can include asset-based approaches, resilience, social determinants of health and ecological theories, protective factors, empowerment, holistic approaches, wellness and well-being, strength-based counselling approaches, and positive psychology. Again, going back to the 2008 study in the United States where they gave African American adults different statements about colon cancer, they found that those that saw the statistics framed in a positive way were more likely to want to be screened afterwards. However, there are some serious barriers to implementing strength-based models of development for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health. These include an often broad, weak, or ill-defined conceptual base for research policy and program design, a tendency to use strength-based as a buzzword without any real depth, and a lack of evaluation of its actual impact on discourse itself, and in turn on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health outcomes. So now let's have a look at how this fits in with the upcoming refresh of the Closing the Gap initiative. We touched on this a bit in episode 1. In 2016, the Council of Australian Governments saw that in 2018, 4 of the 7 targets were set to expire and decided that the Closing a Gap agenda was due for a refresh. By December 2018, draft targets were issued for further discussion. These refresh targets cover 6 priority areas and are further broken down into targets and outcomes. The new targets focus less on the existing deficits between Indigenous and non-Indigenous health and instead outline positive aims for the success and progress which are more measurable. The refresh targets help focus on progress and achievement. Most of these refresh targets are not dependent on how things are going with the non-Indigenous population. That is, they're not moving targets. They're fixed and can be worked towards. For example, the old target of halve the gap in employment by 2018 is replaced by 65% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth are in employment, education or training by 2028. There is also an increased emphasis on collecting and reporting data at finer levels, such as at a state or regional level. The long-standing practice of representing national data is also something that's been long criticised. Smaller state or regional level data is vital for accountability. They give us a more refined insight into where things are going well and where they're not. And thirdly, there's a shift to include additional indicators and topics that are of great importance to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, improving housing, reducing contact with the justice system, and improving access to ownership of land and waters. These new targets are still in the draft stage and are set to be finalised soon, but fingers are crossed that this is a step in the right direction and that changes will be seen. This has been part 5 of Closing the Gap Explained, and it's my final video in this series. For sources, further information, and the rest of the videos in this series, head to my website. Cheers!